Hello, and welcome to episode 12 of the Slouching towards Thatcham podcast, a podcast which showcases the very best of UK parent bloggers. I'm Tim from Slouching towards Thatcham, my blog about life as a father of 3 young children. On each week's podcast, I talk to a fellow parent blogger who talks about and reads one of their favourite posts, and I do the same with one of mine. It's as simple as that. Bite-sized chunks of blogging brilliance. This week, I'm delighted to be joined by Ben from the blog Goodbye Pert Breasts, the diary of a newborn dad. He's the author of not one, but 2 books on fatherhood, as well as being a previous winner of both the most entertaining blog at the Mad Awards and the outstanding category at BritMums. Hi there, Ben.
Hi, good evening, how are you?
I'm very well, thanks. So, to start with, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, your family, and the blog?
Right, well, I have a wife and 3 kids, all from that one wife. They are 8, 5, and 3. That's just their ages. They're called Isaac, Noah, and Jemima. And they are absolutely exhausting, but they do give me an awful lot to write about. So I started the blog about... Wow, it must be about 5 years ago now, just to chart my wife's pregnancy with Noah, with our second child, from a kind of a dad's point of view. Because back in those days, back in the day, there wasn't an awful lot of dad bloggers around. So I thought I'd jump in with the few that were charting parenting and fatherhood from the dad's perspective, and it kind of just snowballed from there. So I've done a couple of books. I've also done a book for the charity SANS, which is the stillbirth and neonatal death charity, and I also lead a men's only antenatal group in my local area. So a load of expectant dads and panicky dads and worried dads get together in a pub, and I just try and espouse my wisdom to them and my experiences and make them feel a little bit better about the impending fatherhood. So I've been doing that for about 18 months, and it's going really well so far.
Excellent. Those were the days when we were still so young and naive, eh? Now, today you're going to be reading us a post about the things parents do. Can you give us a little bit of background about it?
Yeah, well, I wrote this post a couple of years ago, and it was a kind of a response to all the parenting posts you get when they talk about how wonderful parenting is. I mean, you don't get an awful lot of those posts, but you do get a lot of them about how wonderful parenting is, and children being little angels and so on. And I wanted to just give the other side of the argument, the things that the parents all do but don't really talk about, and hopefully, it's just a little list of a few things that every parent will have experienced, and hopefully people listening and the mums and dads listening will be able to say, actually, yeah, I've done that, and it's a bit of a relief that I'm not the only one.
Okay, so in that case, let me hand it over to you.
Okay, so here we go. Parenting changes you, blah, 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 makes you complete, yada, yada, pish, posh. Despite how much parents love to talk and share stories / videos / photos / more photos of their children, there are a few things which they might not admit to very readily. Here are some of those things. At some point, every parent has accidentally knocked their baby's head against a wall or a door frame. This is very, very accidental, I should add. It's not like you set out to clunk your child's skull against the door, but sometimes you're carrying them and it just happens. You stop in your tracks and scan your baby's reaction to see if they're about to cry, and if they're not crying after a few seconds, you're okay. They might have lost all trust in you, but you're okay. Another thing, you've used your child as an excuse to get out of something, whether it's a visit to or from a relative, or to get out of an excruciating function which you just don't want to go to. You've made something up about your child in order to form an excuse. Stuffy family reunion in a village hall 2 hours away, you say? What's that? Timmy's got the tiniest of tiny spots on his cheek, a spot which you just so happen to poke onto his soft skin with a red biro. He must have chicken pox. There's absolutely no way we can possibly go. Oh, it's such a shame. Evil grin face. Having children can make you monstrous in the middle of the night as well, especially when kids do that annoying wailing at 2 a.m. when they're not really crying, they're just making a noise because they're half asleep and inherently evil. They don't mean any harm, but your broken slumber turns you into some kind of hunched monster, hair a mess, eyes sunken, a snarling, gollum, gibbering wreck as you stagger across the landing. You say horrible things you don't mean, which drop off your tongue like poison because you're so damn tired. My wife once told our 3-year-old son that if he didn't stop wailing, she was going to, and I quote, take a pair of scissors and cut up Ted and put him in the bin. He stopped crying. Ted is a fluffy toy, incidentally, and not the name of another child. You've lied about how attractive a friend's baby is. They run up to you, phone outstretched, swiping through photographs of their newborn child, and, as we all know, newborn babies are ugly. They want a response. They want you to tell them how beautiful their child is, when actually you can't stop thinking about how stupid its hair looks, how bulgy its eyes are, and how you could stick a pack of cards in the wrinkles of its face. But you lie, and you tell them what they want to hear. Oh, you exclaim, isn't he gorgeous? And in your head a voice is saying, nope. You've ignored your baby when he or she is screaming. In your head, you justify it as being some form of controlled crying, or that they might go off after a couple of minutes. But if you're honest with yourself, you're ignoring your child because you've just sat down with a glass of wine and ain't no one going to move your ass from that chair.
Thanks, Ben. I'm sure if we try really hard, we can all think of a few more things that parents do. Thanks so much for taking the time to join me on this week's podcast.
No, you're welcome. Thank you for having me.
If you want to read more of Ben's writing, go to his blog Goodbye Pert Breasts at goodbyepertbreasts.com or follow him on Twitter at Ben Wakeling. I'll attach links on the show notes over on slouchingtowardsthatcham.com. Ben spoke of some of the things that parents do. One other thing that I know I've been guilty of on more than one occasion is an affliction that only affects parents. So way back in 2012 I wrote a post about it. This one's called Proud Parentitis. It's been a little over 15 weeks since Isaac ventured off to big boy school for the first time. Overall, it would be fair to say that his first term has gone as well as either Heather or I dared to hope, and we're both bursting with a bad case of that parents-only disease known as proud parentitis. It's an affliction well known to most parents of school-aged children. It starts off as a relatively mild illness known as nervous parentitis. This generally starts to manifest itself 2 to 3 weeks before their child starts school. Symptoms range from mild concern about whether their child will fit in, to tears and separation anxiety on that first morning. And sometimes the children themselves cry too. If untreated, in some cases this can develop into a nasty case of competitive parentitis. This is characterised by the need to know that little Johnny or Joanna has been identified as one of the faster learners academically, or has won more prizes or stickers than anyone else, or is the most popular child in class, or is already catching the eyes of Premier League scouts for their football prowess in the playground at lunchtime. Depending on how well they are doing, this can evolve into a number of related conditions. Acute worryitis, where parents perceive that their child is not learning or developing as fast as they were hoping. Pushy parentitis, where parents feel that the teachers are undervaluing their child's ability and should be upgrading or devoting more time to them. And boastful parentitis, where parents ceaselessly bang on about how their child is the next Stephen Hawking, / Richard Branson, / David Beckham, / superior to your child in every conceivable way. I have no desire to boast of Isaac's achievements, but I am hugely proud of him. His reading and writing have come on in leaps and bounds this term, and while I'm delighted that he seems to be displaying a not inconsiderable degree of academic ability, he's amassed a number of recognition awards already, and last week came home with something called the Class Cup, which I believe is something like the Carling Cup in football. I'm far more pleased by the fact that he seems to actively enjoy his studies, which to me is far more important. If he's going to be spending the next dozen years or more of his life in formal education, I'd much rather he was mediocre and had fun than be brilliant and miserable. I'm just as delighted by his social development. Isaac has always been a fairly mature, outgoing, happy and popular boy, and this seems to have continued in the transition from preschool to primary school. He gets on well with other children in his class, and they seem to get on well with him. He's completely different from me in that respect. From a young age, I've always been what one might call socially awkward, painfully shy, not much of a talker, and happiest in my own company. And I'm thankful that he appears to have taken that aspect of his personality more from his mother. I was so pleased when we learned that he had been chosen to play Joseph in his nativity play this year. Surely it can only be a matter of time before the major Hollywood studios come knocking at his door to offer him room at the inn, or something like that. On reflection, there is no one specific thing that makes me proud. Yes, he's pretty bright. Yes, he's made good friends. Yes, school is a place at which he finds both stimulation and fun. All these things are good, but the conclusion I've come to is that I would be proud of him no matter what, as long as he's finding it enjoyable in some way and achieving some kind of personal growth. Shouldn't that be enough to make any parent proud? Proud parentitis isn't a disease at all. It's a blessing. And that's it for this episode of the Slouching Towards Thatcham podcast. If you'd like to listen to either future or previous episodes, you'll find them published on the blog and also on iTunes and various other podcasting sites. You can follow me on the blog at slouchingtowardsthatcham.com, on Twitter at ThatchamDad, and on various other social media channels. You'll find links to all of the above, plus Ben's links, in the show notes on the blog. All that remains for me is to say thank you all for listening to this podcast, and hopefully you'll join me again next week. Until then, goodbye.